After witnessing a brutal murder, Vera thought she was running from random criminals. But when mysterious Marcus appears with shocking revelations about her family's accidental death, she discovers she's been living a lie for 3 years. Now, two broken souls must navigate a web of betrayal, manipulation, and deadly enemies to uncover the truth that could destroy them both. Welcome back, beautiful people. Today's story is equal parts drama and devotion, and trust us, you'll be hooked from the very first line. Asterisk, the blood on Vera's hands was still warm when she heard the footsteps echoing through the abandoned warehouse. She pressed herself against the rusted shipping container, her breath forming small clouds in the December air that smelled of motor oil and decay. The gun in her trembling grip felt heavier than it should, weighted down by the choice she'd just made. 3 bodies lay scattered across the concrete floor like discarded marionettes. The Martinez brothers wouldn't be collecting debts from anyone ever again. But killing them had cost her the last piece of her soul she'd been trying to protect. The footsteps grew closer, measured and deliberate. Not the frantic scramble of someone fleeing a crime scene, but the confident stride of someone who belonged in places where violence lived. Vera's green eyes narrowed as she calculated distances to the exit. The loading dock was 40 feet away. The emergency stairs, 60. Neither option looked promising with her injured leg. "I know you're here." The voice was male, rough like gravel scraped across concrete, tinged with an accent she couldn't place. "I heard the shots from 6 blocks away." Vera's finger tightened. On the trigger. 3 years of running had taught her that strangers in abandoned warehouses rarely brought good news. She peered around the container's edge and saw him for the first time. He stood in a shaft of pale moonlight streaming through the broken skylight, and even in the darkness, she could see he was dangerous. Tall and lean, with dark hair that fell across his forehead, wearing a black leather jacket over a white shirt, that had seen better days. His hands hung loose at his sides, but she noticed the telltale bulge of a shoulder holster beneath his jacket. What struck her most were his eyes. Even from 30 feet away, she could see they held the same hollow emptiness that stared back at her from mirrors. The look of someone who'd crossed lines they could never uncross. "Martinez sent you," she called out, keeping the container between them. Her voice echoed off the metal walls, sounding braver than she felt. "Martinez is dead." Took another step forward, and she noticed he favored his left leg slightly. It's been for 2 months. Lung cancer. Ironic, considering all the people he put in the ground. Vera's mind raced. If Martinez was dead, then who had been hunting her? Who had sent the brothers after her grandmother's house in Brooklyn, forcing her to make this terrible choice? Then who do you work for? Same person you do, whether you know it or not. He stopped walking, raising his hands slightly to show. They were empty. We're both puppets in someone else's game, Vera. The sound of her name on his lips sent ice through her veins. She'd been using false identities for 3 years.
Ow.
No one should know that name except the ghost she used to be. "Who are you?" "Call me Marcus." He gestured toward the bodies without looking at them. "Though after tonight, I suspect we'll be calling each other a lot of things, mostly curses." Vera stepped out from behind the container, keeping the gun trained on his chest. In the moonlight, she could see the sharp angles of his face, the scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw, the way his dark eyes seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "You have 30 seconds to explain why I shouldn't put a bullet in you and walk away." Marcus smiled, and it was the most unsettling thing she'd seen all night. "Because the people who really killed your family are still alive. Because the fire that destroyed your apartment wasn't an accident. And because the man who ordered your death is planning to finish what he started." The warehouse fell silent except for the distant hum of traffic and the drip of water from a broken pipe. Vera's world tilted on its axis. For 3 years, she'd believed the story the police had fed her. Gas leak. Faulty wiring. Tragic accident. You're lying. Your sister Sarah was going to testify against Viktor Kozlov's money laundering operation. She had evidence that could have put him away for life. Marcus's voice was steady, matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather, so he had her silenced. Your parents were just collateral damage. The gun in Vera's hand began to shake. Sarah had been an accountant at a small firm in Manhattan. Quiet, careful Sarah, who double-checked her grocery receipts and never jaywalked. The idea that she'd been involved with Russian criminals seemed impossible. Sarah wasn't brave enough to go against people like that. People do surprising things when they fall in love. Marcus pulled something from his jacket pocket, moving slowly to avoid spooking her. A photograph. Recognize him? Even from across the space between them, Vera could see it clearly. Sarah, laughing at some restaurant, her arm around a man with kind eyes and dark hair. The same man whose obituary Vera had read in the Times 3 days after the fire. Detective James Walsh, killed in the line of duty. Walsh was investigating. Kozlov Sarah was helping him build the case. He thought they were being careful. Marcus tucked the photo away. They weren't careful enough. Vera's legs felt unsteady. She'd spent 3 years running from shadows, believing she was the random. A survivor of a terrible accident. The guilt had eaten at her like acid. Why had she lived when they hadn't? What cruel twist of fate had saved her simply because she'd been working late that night? Now, she understood. She hadn't been saved by chance. She'd been left alive as bait. Kozlov's been hunting you ever since, Marcus continued. But he's patient, methodical. He wanted to see who you'd contact, where you'd run, what you might know. The Martinez brothers were just the latest test, and you. Vera's voice came out as a whisper. What's your role in this game? Expression darkened, and for a moment she glimpsed something raw and wounded beneath his composed exterior. I'm the man who's been keeping you alive without you knowing it. The reason you've stayed ahead of his people for 3 years? Why? Because Viktor Kozlov killed someone I loved too. His jaw tightened. And sometimes the enemy of your enemy becomes the only family you have left. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Someone had called in the gunshots. Vera looked at the bodies, then at Marcus, calculating odds and alternatives. Trust him, or run alone into a night full of enemies she couldn't see. Marcus extended his hand toward her. We can finish this, Vera, together. But we have to go now. The sirens were getting louder. In moments, this place would be crawling with cops and crime scene techs. Vera stared at his outstretched hand, knowing that taking it would change everything. There would be no going back to her careful, hidden life. No more running and hoping. They'd eventually lose interest. Only the hunt, and whatever lay at the end of it. She reached out and grasped his fingers. His skin was warm and calloused, the grip of someone who'd held weapons and made hard choices. As their hands connected, she felt something shift between them. Recognition, maybe, or resignation. This better not be another lie, she said. Marcus pulled her toward the emergency stairs, his hand still wrapped around hers. The truth is, worse than any lie I could tell you. As they ran up the metal steps, Vera caught a glimpse of his profile in the moonlight and realized she was already in deeper than she'd ever intended to be. The safe house was a 4th-floor walk-up in Chinatown that smelled like sesame oil and old cigarettes. Marcus led Vera through a maze of narrow hallways painted institutional green, past doors that leaked the sounds of muffled television programs and crying babies. The normalcy of it felt surreal after the warehouse. Home sweet home, Marcus said, unlocking a door marked for C. The apartment beyond was spartanly furnished but clean. A single window looked out onto a fire escape and the neon-lit chaos of Mott. Street below, Vera stood in the doorway, suddenly aware that she was trusting her life to a stranger who might be exactly what she was running from. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her exhausted and thinking too clearly. How do I know you're not working for Kozlov? Marcus tossed his jacket onto a worn leather chair and moved to the window, checking the street below. Because if I were, you'd already be dead. Kozlov doesn't take prisoners. He rolled up his sleeves, and Vera saw the proof of his words. His forearms were crisscrossed with scars, some old and faded, others more recent. Burns, cuts, and what looked like cigarette marks. Someone had worked him over professionally. Kozlov's people gave me those last year when they caught up with me in Prague. His voice was casual, but his hands trembled slightly as he reached for a bottle of whiskey on the kitchen counter. Took them 3 days to decide I didn't know where you were. Vera sank into the chair across from him, the weight of 3 years finally settling on her shoulders. Why were you protecting me? Poured 2 glasses and slid one across the small table between them. The whiskey burned, but it was a clean burn, washing away the metallic taste of fear, because I made a promise to someone. He stared into his glass like it held answers. My partner, Detective Alina Vasquez. She was Walsh's backup the night. He died. The pieces clicked together in Vera's mind. She was there when they killed him. She tried to save him. Took 3 bullets doing it. Marcus's knuckles whitened around the glass. Lived long enough to tell me about the case they'd been building. About you, about Sarah. She loved him. What? It wasn't a question. Vera could hear it in the way Marcus said Elena's name. Like a prayer for the dead. They were going to be married. Alina showed me the ring the day before the operation went bad. He finished his whiskey in one swallow. She made me swear I'd find Sarah's sister. Keep her safe until we could take Kozlov down. Vera studied his face in the dim light. The scar, the hollow eyes, the way he held himself like he was ready for violence at any moment. How long were you and Alina together? 5 years? Met her when she was still in uniform, fresh out of the academy? She was too good for someone like me. His smile was bitter. I was already working cases off the books, gray area stuff. She tried to save me from myself. What kind of cases? Marcus stood and moved to a filing cabinet in the corner. From it, he pulled a thick folder and dropped it on the table between them. Crime scene photos spilled out, bodies in alleys, abandoned buildings, hotel rooms, all of them bearing the same signature wounds. Contract kills that the NYPD couldn't afford to solve sometimes. He sorted through the photos. With practiced efficiency, I was good at finding people who didn't want to be found, Kozlov noticed. Vera's stomach clenched as she recognized the professional quality of the kills. Clean, efficient, personal. He hired you. For 2 years before I understood what I was really doing. By the time I realized Kozlov was using me to eliminate rivals. In loose ends, I was in too deep. Marcus's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Alina never knew. I kept that part of my life separate. Until Walsh and Alina stumbled onto the money laundering case, Kozlov ordered me to eliminate the witnesses. Marcus met her eyes, and she saw the guilt that had been eating at him. Your sister, Detective Walsh, Alina. The apartment fell, silent except for the distant rumble of late-night traffic. Vera felt something cold settle in her chest as she processed what he was telling her. You were supposed to kill my family. I couldn't do it. Not Alina, not innocent people. Gathered the photos back into the folder. So I warned Walsh instead. Told him Kozlov knew about the investigation. Gave him time to get Sarah somewhere. Safe. But they didn't make it. Kozlov suspected I'd turned. He sent other people. More thorough people. Marcus's jaw tightened. By the time I got to your family's apartment, it was already burning. Vera closed her eyes, remembering that night. Coming home to find fire trucks and ambulances, police officers with gentle voices telling her there had been an accident. The smell of smoke that clung to her clothes for weeks afterward. I pulled Alina out of the warehouse where they'd tortured her. She was barely conscious, but she made me promise. His voice cracked slightly. Find Sarah's sister. Keep her safe. Make Kozlov pay. So you've been hunting him for 3 years? And he's been hunting both of us? Marcus moved back to the window, scanning the street with professional paranoia. I've been staying one step ahead, feeding him false information. About your location while I built a case that could actually stick. Vera joined him at the window. The street below buzzed with late-night activity. Food vendors, couples heading home from dates, teenagers with too much energy and nowhere to channel it. Normal people living normal lives. What changed tonight? Why reveal yourself now? Because Kozlov's getting impatient. The Martinez brothers were just the beginning. He's bringing in specialists from overseas. People who won't stop until you're dead and I'm back in line. Marcus turned to face her, and she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. We're out of time, so what's the plan? Take the fight to him. Tomorrow night, there's a high-stakes poker game in a private club on the Upper West Side. Kozlov will be there. It's the best chance we'll get to get close to him. Vera stared at him. You want to walk into a room full of his people and what? Challenge him to a duel? Want to get close enough to record him confessing to ordering the murders. With the right evidence, the FBI will have no choice but to move on him. And if he doesn't confess? Marcus pulled a gun from the cabinet and checked the clip. Then we improvise. The casual way he handled the weapon sent a chill through Vera. She was looking at a man who'd crossed so many lines he couldn't even see them anymore. A killer trying to redeem himself by committing one more necessary murder. There's something you're not telling me. She could feel it in the tension between them. The way he avoided her eyes when he talked about Alina Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Alina didn't just make me promise to protect you. She made me promise something else.
What?
Couldn't be taken alive. I'd make sure he suffered the way she did, the way Walsh did, the way your family did. His voice was deadly quiet. Alina was a good cop. She believed in justice. But at the end, she wanted revenge. Vera understood then. Marcus wasn't just trying to protect her or honor his dead partner's memory. He was planning to torture and kill Viktor Kozlov, and he wanted her help doing it. You want me to be your partner in murder? I want you to help me give Alina and your family the peace they deserve. He moved closer, and she could smell leather and whiskey and something darker underneath. But I need to know you're with me, all the way. Vera looked at the crime scene photos scattered across the table, and at Marcus's scarred hands, then at her own reflection in the dark window. Somewhere out there, Viktor Kozlov was sleeping peacefully in his mansion, protected by money and violence, and the assumption that justice would never find him. She thought about Sarah's laugh, her parents' anniversary dinner she'd missed because of work, Elena's engagement ring that would never be worn. All the futures that had been stolen by one man's greed. I'm with you, she said, and meant it. Marcus nodded, but something flickered across his face. Relief, maybe, or regret. Get some sleep. Tomorrow night we end this. Vera settled onto the couch with a thin blanket. She couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus was still hiding something. Something that would change everything once she learned the truth. Outside, the city hummed with secrets and sins, and somewhere in the darkness, Viktor Kozlov was planning their deaths. The Meridian Club occupied the top 3 floors of a pre-war building overlooking Central Park, its windows glowing like golden eyes in the Manhattan twilight. Vera adjusted the black cocktail dress Marcus had provided, acutely aware of the recording. Device taped beneath her ribs, and the small pistols strapped to her thigh. Remember, we're just another couple looking to lose money at cards, Marcus murmured as they approached the elevator. He looked different in his tailored suit, less like a killer and more like the kind of man who belonged in places like this. Almost normal, if you ignored the predatory way his eyes scanned every face and exit. The elevator operator was a thin man with careful eyes, who studied their invitation before pressing the button for the 22nd floor. The building, Vera felt her stomach drop with more than just the elevator's motion. What if he recognizes me? He won't. You were 15 when your family died, and you've changed. Marcus's voice was steady, but she caught him checking his watch. Besides, he thinks you're dead, has for 2 years now. The elevator opened onto a world of burgundy leather and crystal chandeliers, where cigarette smoke hung in lazy spirals. And the sound of shuffling cards mixed with quiet laughter. Men in expensive suits clustered around felt tables, their faces serious with the particular intensity that only came with high stakes. Vera spotted Viktor Kozlov immediately. He sat at the center table like a spider at the heart of his web, his silver hair perfectly styled, and his pale eyes missing nothing. He was smaller than she'd expected, almost delicate. But there was something in the way the other players deferred to him that spoke of barely contained violence. There he is, she whispered. I see him. Marcus guided her toward the bar, his hand warm and steady at the small of her back. We'll observe for a while. Learn the rhythm of the room. They ordered drinks and found a position with a clear view of Kozlov's table. Vera watched the Russian work, noting how he studied each player's tells, how he controlled the flow of conversation, how his bodyguards positioned themselves around the room like chess pieces. He's not just gambling, she realized. He's conducting business. Marcus followed her gaze to see a nervous-looking man in an ill-fitting suit leaning over to whisper something in Kozlov's ear. The Russian's expression didn't change, but he nodded once and slid a chip across the table. The man pocketed it and disappeared toward the elevator. Payments, orders, could be anything. Marcus sipped his whiskey. We need to get closer. How? His people are watching every approach. We join the game. Vera stared at him. With what money? That table's minimum bet is probably more than I made in a year. Marcus pulled a thick roll of bills from his jacket. Elena's life insurance. Left it all to me. His voice was carefully neutral. It seemed fitting to use it to buy her justice. They approached Kozlov's table during a natural break in the play. Up close, the Russian was even more unsettling. His skin had the pale translucency of someone who spent too much time indoors, and his eyes were the color of winter sky. When he looked at Vera, she felt exposed, like he could see straight through her careful disguise. Room for 2 more? Marcus asked, setting the cash on the felt. Kozlov studied them both with the attention of a scientist examining specimens. I don't believe we've met. Victor Kozlov. His accent was faint but unmistakable, cultured and precise. David Sterling. This is my wife, Catherine. Marcus's voice carried just the right note of wealthy boredom. We heard this was where the real action was. Indeed it is. Kozlov's smile revealed teeth like polished ivory. Though I should warn you, we play for more than money here. Sometimes we play for truth. The cards were dealt, and Vera found herself in a game where every move felt loaded with meaning. Kozlov was a masterful player, reading the other participants. Like open books, but Marcus held his own with the cool efficiency of someone who'd learned to gamble with his life. As the evening progressed, Vera began to understand the subtle dance happening around the table. Kozlov wasn't just playing cards. He was extracting information, testing loyalties, making deals with the other players through coded conversation and carefully placed bets. Your wife is very quiet, Kozlov observed during a particularly tense hand. His pale eyes fixed on Vera. With uncomfortable intensity, does she always let you do the talking? Catherine's still learning the game, Marcus replied smoothly. But she's a quick study. I'm sure she is. Kozlov's smile was razor thin. There's something familiar about her. Have we met before? Vera's blood turned to ice, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. I don't think so. I'd remember someone like you. Yes, I imagine you would. Kozlov laid down his cards, revealing a full house. I have an excellent memory for faces, especially beautiful ones. The hand ended with Kozlov collecting a substantial pot, and Vera excused herself to visit the ladies' room. Her hands were shaking as she splashed water on her face, trying to calm her racing heart. In the mirror, she looked like a stranger, playing dress-up in someone else's life. When she returned to the table, the conversation had taken a darker turn. One of the other players, a heavy-set man with nervous eyes, was quietly pleading with Kozlov about something. The Russian listened with the patience of a confessor, occasionally nodding or asking quiet questions. Family troubles, Kozlov explained. To the table as the man left, looking defeated. His daughter made some poor choices. I'm helping him resolve the situation. What kind of help? Marcus asked casually. The permanent kind. Ives. Smile was winter cold. Some problems can only be solved with finality. Don't you agree, Mr. Sterling? Vera felt the recording device against her ribs and prayed it was picking up every word. This was what they needed. Kozlov casually discussing murder like a business. Transaction depends on the problem, Marcus replied. Oh, I think you understand exactly what I mean. Kozlov leaned back in his chair, studying Marcus with new interest. You have the look of a man who's solved permanent problems before. The tension at the table ratcheted up several degrees. Around them, the other players grew quieter, sensing the shift in mood. Kozlov's bodyguards moved closer, their hands drifting toward concealed weapons. I'm just here to play cards, Marcus said. Of course you are. Kozlov's voice was silk over steel. It's just like Sarah Brennan was just an accountant. It's just like Detective Walsh was just investigating financial crimes. Just like Elena Vasquez was. Just trying to do her job. The names hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Vera felt her world tilt as the pretense crumbled around them. Kozlov had known who they were from the moment they walked in. "I don't know those names," Marcus said, but his hand was already moving toward his jacket. "Please, Mr. Marcus Chen, don't insult my intelligence." Kozlov gestured, and his men stepped forward. "Or should I call you by your real name?" The one Alina Vasquez whispered before she died. Marcus's face went white. "What did you say?" "She was very brave at the end, very loyal. She refused to tell us where you were hiding. Sarah's sister, even when we explained how much pain we could cause." Kozlov's eyes glittered with cruel amusement. "But she did say your name, over and over, like a prayer." Vera saw something break inside Marcus then. The careful control he'd maintained for 3 years shattered, revealing the raw grief and rage underneath. His hand closed around the gun in his jacket. "You tortured her. Did what was necessary, just as I'm doing now." Kozlov nodded to his men, though I must admit I'm disappointed. I expected more of a challenge from the man who killed 6 of my best people. 7, Marcus corrected, and moved. What followed happened in the space between heartbeats. Marcus drew his weapon as Kozlov's bodyguards reached for theirs. Vera overturned the table, sending cards and chips flying as she rolled toward cover. Gunshots echoed through the elegant room as other patrons screamed and dove for the floor. Marcus put 2 bullets center mass into the nearest bodyguard, then spun to engage the second. Vera pulled the pistol from her thigh holster and put a round into a third man who was trying to flank them, but Kozlov was already moving, disappearing through a door marked private at the back of the room. Marcus started after him, blood streaming from a graze on his temple. "Marcus, wait." Vera called, but he was already gone, consumed by 3 years of grief and guilt and the need for vengeance. She followed him through the door and found herself in Kozlov's private office. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over Central Park. The walls were lined with books and artwork that probably cost more than most people's houses. Kozlov stood behind his desk, no longer the genial host, but something far more dangerous. In his hand was a chrome-plated pistol, aimed directly at Marcus's chest. "Detective Marcus Chen," Kozlov said conversationally. "Elena's lover, Sarah's protector. My former employee." He smiled. "And now, my greatest disappointment." "Marcus Ritual," Marcus replied, his own gun trained on Kozlov's head. "Oh, I doubt that. You see, I've been planning this reunion for a very long time, ever since Alina Vasquez broke my heart by refusing to tell me what I needed to know." Vera moved to Marcus's side, her weapon adding to the standoff. "It's over, Kozlov. We have everything on tape. The FBI will find 3 bodies and a very sad story about a murder-suicide," Kozlov interrupted. "You see, I've been preparing for this moment. My people downstairs have already called the police. By the time they arrive, you'll both be dead, and I'll be the traumatized victim of a home invasion." "You're forgetting something," Marcus said. "What's that?" "I don't care if I die, as long as you die first." Kozlov's smile faltered slightly. "Alina said the same thing, right before I had her shot." The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. Vera saw his gun hand waver as the full weight of what Kozlov was telling him sank in. "She didn't die in the warehouse," Marcus whispered. "Oh no, that was just where we questioned her. Alina Vasquez died in a basement in Queens, slowly and alone. Calling your name." Kozlov's voice was honey over broken glass, but she did give me one final gift before the end. "What?" "She told me about the insurance policy. The one with Sarah Brennan's real sister listed as the beneficiary." Kozlov's pale eyes fixed on Vera. "Hello, Victoria Brennan. You're taller than your file photo, but those green eyes are unmistakable." Truth hit Vera like ice water. Alina hadn't just known who she was. She'd been using Vera as bait, with Marcus as the unwitting hunter, the insurance money, the safe house, the careful protection. All of it designed to bring them to this moment. "Alina was working for you?" she breathed. Detective Vasquez was a pragmatist. "When she realized she couldn't beat me, she decided to join me. In exchange for her cooperation, I promised her lover would live, at least until tonight." Marcus's gun hand began to shake. "You're lying, am I? Ask yourself why she never told you she'd found Sarah's sister." Why she kept that information to herself until the very end? Elena Vasquez bought your life with her betrayal, and now I'm here to collect. The office fell silent except for the distant wail of sirens growing closer. Vera stared at Marcus, seeing the doubt and horror warring in his eyes. Everything they'd built together, everything they'd trusted, was crumbling around them. And in that moment of fractured truth, Viktor Kozlov made his move. Kozlov moved like lightning, diving behind his massive oak desk as Marcus's shot splintered the wood where his head had been. Return fire exploded from a hidden gun port in the desk, forcing Vera and Marcus to take cover behind a leather armchair. That wouldn't stop bullets for long. You always were too emotional. Detective Chen Kozlov called out, his voice eerily calm. Elena understood that weakness. She used it to manipulate you beautifully. Marcus reloaded with mechanical precision. But Vera could see the devastation in his eyes. 3 years of grief and guilt were collapsing into something darker. She loved me. She loved survival more. Another shot punched through the chair's leather, stuffing exploding around them. Did you really think it was coincidence that she found Sarah's sister so quickly? That she happened to have all the right contacts? All the right information? Vera grabbed Marcus's arm, feeling the tremor in his muscles. Don't listen to him. He's trying to break you. Elena Vasquez spent 2 years feeding me intelligence on police investigations. Kozlov continued relentlessly. Drug busts, murder cases, organized crime task forces. All in exchange for my protection of one Marcus Chen, the man she claimed to love. The sirens were getting closer. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Vera could see red and blue lights. Reflecting off the surrounding buildings, they had minutes before this room would be flooded with cops who wouldn't ask questions before shooting. We need to move, she hissed, but Marcus seemed frozen, his weapon trained on the desk where Kozlov was hidden. Tell me about Elena's last day, Marcus called out, his voice raw. If you're going to destroy everything I believed, at least give me the truth. Kozlov's laughter was like broken glass. The truth. She came to me voluntarily, walked into my restaurant and sat down at my table like we were old friends. Said she wanted to make a deal. Vera saw Marcus flinch, as if he'd been shot. She offered me Sarah Brennan's sister in exchange for your life. One death to save another. Very romantic. Don't you think? Liar. But Marcus's voice lacked conviction. She gave me your real name, your safe house locations, your methods of contact. Everything I needed to find you when the time came. Another bullet tore through their cover. The only thing she refused to give me was Victoria's exact location. Said she needed time to arrange the meeting. Vera's blood went cold. What meeting? Tonight, of course? This was always Elena's plan. Bring you both together in one place where I could settle all my debts at once. Kozlov's voice carried the satisfaction of a chess master announcing checkmate. Even suggested the poker game. Said Marcus would never be able to resist the chance for a direct confrontation. The chair they were hiding behind was disintegrating under Kozlov's fire. Vera looked around desperately for another exit, but the only door was across an open space that would leave them exposed. But the windows were their only option, and they were 22 floors up. Elena died believing she was saving you, Marcus. That has to count for something. She died a traitor, Marcus replied, but his gun hand was shaking now. She died in love. Kozlov rose from behind the desk, his chrome pistol gleaming in the light from the chandeliers. Which is more than either of you will manage. Marcus stood up then, abandoning cover entirely. He walked toward Kozlov with the steady pace of a man who'd already decided to die. You want me? Here I am, Marcus. No. Vera reached for him, but he was already in the open, his weapon aimed at Kozlov's. Chesta the Russian smiled and pulled his trigger. The click of an empty chamber echoed through the office like a death knell. Kozlov's expression shifted from triumph to confusion to fear in the space of a heartbeat. Insurance, Marcus said, still advancing. Elena taught me that. Always have a backup plan. He'd counted every shot Kozlov had fired, keeping track with. The precision of someone who'd learned that mathematics could mean the difference between life and death. Kozlov scrambled backward, his composure finally cracking. You don't understand. Elena made me promise to keep you alive. She loved you enough to betray everything she believed in. Then I'll see her in hell and ask her myself. Marcus's finger tightened on the trigger. Wait. Vera's voice cut through. The moment like a blade. Both men turned to look at her, and she realized she was pointing her gun at Marcus instead of Kozlov. There's something else we need to know first. Marcus stared at her in disbelief. Vera, what are you doing? Right thing. Her voice was steady, but inside she was screaming. Tell him about Sarah Kozlov. Tell him what really happened to my sister. Da-da-da-da. Kozlov's pale eyes darted between them, calculating new angles. Our Brennan was already dead when Alina came to me. Car accident on the FDR drive. Very tragic. Words hit Vera like a physical blow. You're lying. Alina never told you, did she, Marcus? To let you believe you were protecting Sarah's sister? But Sarah had been dead for 6 months? The woman you've been hunting shadows for never existed. Marcus's gun wavered. That's impossible. The case files, the evidence. All fabricated by Alina. She needed a reason to keep you motivated, keep you running, keep you alive long enough for her plan to work. Kozlov straightened his tie with trembling fingers. There never was a witness to protect. It's just a dead girl's identity that Alina used to manipulate you. Vera felt the floor drop out from under her. Everything she'd believed about herself, about why she was running, about why her family had died, was crumbling around her. Then who am I? She whispered. Victoria Brennan, Sarah's younger sister. But not the woman Marcus thought he was protecting. Kozlov's smile was cruel. Elena found you working as a waitress in Boston, tracked you down through old school records. She needed someone who looked like Sarah, someone she could use as bait. The recording device under Vera's ribs felt like it was burning through her skin. All of this was being captured, but for what? There was no justice to be served here, no grand revelation that would set things right. Just lies built on lies, betrayal layered over betrayal. Alina brought me to New York, Vera said, the pieces falling into place. She set up the safe house, the new identity, everything. She needed you to believe you were in danger so you'd stay close to Marcus. So when the time came, she could deliver you both to me. Kozlov took a step toward the shattered window, perhaps calculating his chances of survival in a 22-story fall. But why? Marcus's voice was hollow. If Alina was working for you, why kill her? Because in the end, she tried to change the terms of our deal. She wanted to save you both, run away together, start over somewhere I couldn't reach. Kozlov shrugged. I don't renegotiate contracts. The sirens had stopped. Heavy footsteps echoed. In the hallway outside the office, the police had arrived, and they would be through that door in moments. So what now? Vera asked, still keeping her gun trained on Marcus. Do we all die here? Or do we try to find a way out of this that doesn't end with more bodies? Marcus turned to look at her, and she saw something she'd never seen before in his eyes, not just grief or rage, but a kind of terrible clarity. You were never the woman I was protecting, he said quietly. You were just another lie, Elena told me. Maybe. But the person I became while running from shadows, the choices I made, the things I felt, ... Vera's voice caught. Those were real. They, or were those Elena's programming too? The question hung between them like a blade. Outside, she could hear tactical teams taking positions, voices shouting orders through bullhorns. They were running out of time. There's something else, Kozlov said, his voice taking on the desperate tone of a man playing his last card. Alina left you more than just her insurance money, Marcus. She left you a message. Marcus's attention snapped back to the Russian. What message? Kozlov reached slowly into his jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope. She gave this to me before she died, said if anything happened to her, I should give it to you when we finally met. It could be a trap, Vera warned. Everything's been a trap, Marcus replied, but he lowered his gun. Give it to me. Kozlov tossed the envelope across the room. Marcus caught it with his free hand, never taking his eyes off the Russian. Careful movements, he tore it open and pulled out a single sheet of paper. As he read, Vera watched his face transform. The hardness melted away, replaced by something raw and broken. What does it say? Marcus looked up at her and she saw tears in his eyes. She says she's sorry. That everything she did was to keep me alive long enough to find my way back to being the man she fell in love with. The good man. He folded the letter and put it in his pocket. She says Kozlov will try to turn us against each other at the end. That we can't let him destroy what we've built together, even if it was built on lies. The office door exploded inward, and tactical officers poured through in full riot gear. Red laser dots danced across the walls as they shouted commands to drop weapons and get on the ground. In that moment of chaos, Viktor Kozlov made his final move. Instead of surrendering, he rushed toward the shattered window, choosing death over capture. But Marcus was faster, grabbing the Russian by his expensive suit jacket and hauling him back from the edge. "No," Marcus said, his voice deadly quiet. "Don't get the easy way out." As the police swarmed them, Vera realized that Elena's final gift hadn't been the letter. It had been showing them who they really were underneath all the lies and manipulation. It's not victims or pawns, but people capable of choosing justice over revenge, hope over despair, even if that choice would cost them everything. 6 months later, Vera sat in the witness stand of a federal courthouse, fluorescent lights harsh against her pale skin. The recording device had worked perfectly that night at the Meridian Club, capturing every word of Kozlov's confession. The path from that blood-soaked office to this sterile courtroom had been paved with more revelations than she'd been prepared for. The defense attorney, a sharp-faced woman in an expensive suit, circled her like a predator. "Ms. Brennan, you admit that you entered the Meridian Club with the intention of committing murder." "I entered with the intention of getting justice for my family." Vera's voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly in her lap. "What happened after that was self-defense." "Self-defense." The attorney's tone dripped skepticism. "Is that what you call executing 3 men in a warehouse 2 days before?" Vera met her gaze without flinching. "I call it survival." Across the courtroom, Marcus sat in the gallery, his face carefully neutral. He'd testified earlier, revealing the full scope of Elena's deception and his own role in Kozlov's organization. The immunity deal he'd negotiated with the FBI had saved him from prison, but Vera could see it hadn't saved him from himself. They hadn't spoken since that night. Too much truth had been carved out of them, leaving wounds that might never heal. On the stand, Vera told her story one more time. The manufactured identity. The years of running from enemies who saw her as leverage rather than a person. The gradual understanding that her entire life had been shaped by other people's choices. She spoke about Elena's manipulation, Kozlov's cruelty, and the impossible decision to trust Marcus, even when everything around them was falling apart. The prosecutor, a tired-looking man with kind eyes, approached for redirect. "Ms. Brennan, in your opinion, was Detective Vasquez a victim or a perpetrator?" Vera considered the question for a long moment. Through the courtroom's tall windows, she could see the East River flowing toward the harbor, carrying the city's secrets out to sea. "Both," she said finally. "Lena made terrible choices, but she made them out of love. That doesn't excuse what she did, but it doesn't make her a monster either, just human." "And what about yourself? You consider yourself a victim?" "Not anymore." Vera straightened in her chair. "Victims don't get to choose their fate. I'm choosing mine." The trial lasted another week. Kozlov, faced with overwhelming evidence and the testimony of his former associates, pleaded guilty to racketeering, murder, conspiracy, and a dozen other charges. He would die in federal prison, his empire dismantled by the very recordings he'd been so confident would never see the light of day. But victory tasted like ashes in Vera's mouth. She found Marcus waiting for her outside the courthouse on the day of sentencing. He looked older, worn down by months of depositions and testimony. The scar on his face seemed more pronounced, a permanent reminder of the violence that had brought them together. "So it's over," he said. "The legal part, anyway." Vera pulled, her coat tighter against the October wind. "What will you do now?" "The FBI offered me a consulting position." "Cold cases. Organized crime." He shrugged. "Turns out my particular skill set has legitimate applications. And Elena's insurance money? I'm donating it to a victims' rights organization." Seemed like something she would have wanted. Looked out at the river, his expression unreadable. What about you? I'm leaving New York. Going back to school, maybe? Try to figure out who I am when I'm not running from anyone. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the city flow around them. Vera wanted to say something about the connection they'd shared, the way they'd understood each other's darkness, the possibility of building something real from the ashes of Elena's deception, but the words wouldn't come. I need to ask you. Something Marcus said suddenly. That night in Kozlov's office, when you pointed your gun at me instead of him, were you protecting him, or were you protecting me from becoming a murderer? Vera had been dreading this question for months. Both. Neither. I don't know. She turned to face him fully. I saw you about to cross a line you couldn't come back from. Elena had already sacrificed everything to keep you alive. I couldn't let you destroy yourself at the end. Even though everything between us was built on lies, lies were Elena's. What we felt, what we chose to do with the truth when we finally learned it, that was ours. Vera's voice was barely above a whisper, wasn't it? Marcus was quiet. For so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. Elena's letter said something else, something I didn't tell the court. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the worn envelope. She said that if we survived, if we found each other at the end of all this, that we should remember that love built on shared pain can become something beautiful if we're brave enough to let it. And do you believe that? I want to. Met her eyes. But I think we both need time to figure out who we are without the shadows, without the running and the lies and the violence. Vera nodded, though it felt like something was breaking inside her chest. How long? I don't know. A year? 2? However long it takes to become people who can love each other for the right reasons instead of the wrong ones. She understood what he was saying. We were too damaged, too shaped by trauma and deception, to build anything healthy together right now. But maybe given time and distance and the chance to heal, they could find their way back to each other. Will you write? She asked. If you want me to. I want you to. Marcus smiled then. The first genuine smile she'd seen from him since that night at the Meridian Club. It transformed his entire face, showing her glimpses of the man Elena had fallen in love with, the man he might become again, given the chance. Take care of yourself, Victoria Brennan, he said, using her real name for the first time. You too, Marcus Chen. He walked away then, disappearing into the crowd of commuters and tourists that flowed around the courthouse like water around a stone. Vera watched until she couldn't see him anymore, then pulled out her phone and called a taxi to take her to the airport. 2 years later, she was finishing her master's degree in social work when the letter arrived. No return address, but she recognized the handwriting immediately. Inside was a photograph of Marcus standing in front of a small house with a white picket fence, somewhere that looked like it might be Vermont or New Hampshire. He was wearing civilian clothes and smiling at whoever was taking the picture. The back, in his careful script he'd written, learned how to grow tomatoes. Turns out I'm better at nurturing things than destroying them. Still have your number if you want to call sometime. And Vera held the photograph for a long time, studying his face for signs of the haunted man she'd known. The ghosts were still there in his eyes, but they seemed quieter now. At peace, maybe? She picked up her phone and dialed his number. Hello, Vera, he said when he answered, like he'd been waiting for her call. Hello, Marcus. Marcus, tell me about your tomatoes. And for the first time in years, they talked like two people who had found their way home. The Eon didn't like this video? If the story touched your heart, subscribe for more emotional tales and share with someone who believes in the power of true love. And let us know in the comments. We love connecting with our global community of romance lovers.